Hey guys, Shane McMurray from the Wedding Report. In this episode, I interviewed John, who is the owner of Silverfox Studios. They're located in Long Island, New York. They're a full-service wedding photography company. So great interview. Enjoy. John, so let's talk about your business. Tell me about what you do. Tell me about what goes into the work that you do. Tell me where you're located. Make sure you
Sure.
mention your website, Instagram, whatever you want to do. All right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sure. So I own Silverfox Studios. We are a full-service wedding photography studio based on Long Island. We do a lot of work in the tri-state area here: New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. We also have an office in Manhattan. We've been in business now. This is our 28th year.
Wow.
And yeah, and so we shoot hundreds of weddings each year, and so it's a little. I mean, the wedding industry, specifically photography, has evolved over the years, especially since I've entered it, and changed in a lot of different ways. And one of the things I find most important is that as a company, that you continue to adapt and evolve, because if you don't, then you become sort of stale and outdated.
Yeah.
So.
How many employees do you guys have? Is it just you, or do you have a whole crew?
No, basically we have our office staff here, which consists of myself, a general manager, an event coordinator, a senior photographer, and a couple of editors. So for both photo and for video. And then we have photographers who work in the field, that shoot. Obviously not all the events, photographers, videographers, both main photographers and second photographers,
Nice.
and videographers and drone operators and stuff. So, it's a big, a lot of moving parts. It's a big team. But what we've done is put a lot of time and resources into getting everybody trained the right way. So it's a very uniform, cohesive approach, so the clients know that the experience they're going to have across the board is always the Silverfox experience. And that's really what we kind of profess the most, because this is more than just about taking photos the day of the wedding.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot that goes into it, right? It's more than
Yes.
just, so you've got 28 years experience. So were you a photographer before you started the business, or is that like your experience?
So I kind of, the quick story is my grandfather was a wedding photographer, hence the name Silverfox. I named the company after him back in the 50s and 60s in the Bronx. And so I grew up around cameras, but I didn't go to school. I went to school for marketing. And then when I graduated, I kind of was drawn into the photo and video field, and we opened up as actually a video company, but not to do weddings. It was really to do more commercial work.
Interesting.
But, when you're of the marrying age, which I was, my friends would be like, hey, you got all this gear. Could you shoot our wedding? And so it kind of just started like that. And, one thing led to another. We added photography on a couple years after. And now we do almost no corporate work and pretty much exclusively weddings. And so it was just one of those things where you never know what's going to happen until you kind of get into it. But honestly, it's a fabulous industry. We're blessed to be in it, and we're looking forward to another couple of decades here.
Did you ever get a chance to work with your grandfather out in the field?
Not out in the field, no. By the time he stopped shooting in the early 70s, and I obviously was 5-6 years old, but I didn't. But I did get to learn. Obviously, all my early camera experience was from him and from my uncle, and being around cameras from when I was knee high. It was always kind of in my DNA.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, do you require that your staff go through your specific training, or do you?
Yeah. So I mean. So there's a lot of wedding photographers out there now. I mean, more than ever before, and a lot of really talented people. And so what we try to do is bring people in that are, obviously the work's got to be great. That goes without saying. We kind of give them the framework and our methodology as to how we do things, the shots that we expect, what the expectations are. But really, at the end of the day, it comes down to personality. Because that matters so much. You spend more time with your wedding photographer than any other vendor the day of the wedding, and you spend probably more time with them than any other vendor, period, because the time before and after is significant as well. I mean, we're the only vendor that's around after the wedding. So
Yeah.
the people part of it cannot be overstated enough. I mean, when I sit with clients, I tell them, listen, I can take you through the pricing. I can tell you the people that we have here and how the training they have gone through. But at the end of the day, you need to work with them. You need to have an experience with them, because that is going to be the real true test. Because, you know, what might work for me might not work for you, but we got to make sure it works for you.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So walk me through kind of what happens, from I contact you and need to want to schedule an appointment with you or whatever, and then all the way through the wedding. Tell me what goes into this thing.
Sure. So, you contact us either from our website, silverfoxweddings.com, or silverfoxvideo.com, or silverfoxphotography.com, but any number of ways. And we've made it really easy for clients to do that. They can text us, they can schedule their own appointment, they can call us. But once you step in the door here, that's when the experience starts. We give our clients a menu with some complimentary drinks. You want an espresso, you want a cappuccino, you want a glass of wine, because that's really when they start to evaluate everything.
Yeah.
And so that time and investment in that training and just that thought process is all a part of it. Our average appointment goes for about an hour to an hour and a half.
Okay.
Very detailed in terms of finding out what they want with their day, because that gives us helping their day and the scheduling and planning of their day. It can't be overstated enough, because the only time you really see things kind of get jammed up in a wedding is when there's not enough time, and you only have the cocktail hour to do all the photos, yet the bride and groom want to go to the cocktail hour. So we have to try to manage their expectations, and also point them in the right direction as to how the day flows. After hopefully they book with us, we schedule an engagement session. So all of our clients, we include an engagement session, because once again, I think that that's invaluable in terms of getting to connect. The clients that opt not to do it come down for what we call a meet and greet. So they'll come down and meet the photographers beforehand. But it's really important to us that and most clients want to meet their photographer. About a month before the wedding, they'll do what we call a finals appointment, which our event coordinator, Danielle, literally, we go over every possible detail of the day. The shot lists, they're pages long, because we want to equip our team with all the information possible. And the clients as well. That day, we don't expect them to remember anything, because it's their wedding day. You know what I mean? And they're having fun. They have all the phone numbers. They have my cell number, my wife's cell, so they're able to get contact. And then the day goes off, hopefully 100% seamless, which almost all of them do. And then after the wedding, we send them a sneak peek, as we call it. But usually about 4 or 5 weeks after the wedding, we deliver to them all of their edited images and raw footage, because I like to give people everything, so they, because a lot of studios don't give the raw footage right away, I find. And I just feel like that leaves so much to you're like, I want to see that, you know what I mean? So we give it to them right away. We've been doing it for years, and they love it, because they're able to kind of relive the day. The video shows you the entire, maybe you missed something, or maybe you didn't remember something. And then we begin the post-production process, which is very much a back and forth. Every client has their own timeline. We try to keep them, guided into a timeline that is not, 6 years. Some go 6 years, most go 6 or 7 months, but you can't they've got to choose the photos and the music and all that stuff. And so we do our best to kind of guide them and keep them on track, because their life then it starts, and the last thing they're thinking about is, I got to choose they're buying a house and having a family.
Yeah, exactly. So you find that most people are typically getting just photography, or you find more they're getting photography and video together, or is it just part of your deal?
Yeah, so no, we don't require that people do both with us, but more than 80% of our clients choose us for both services. The ones that typically don't are ones that aren't doing video, which I feel since video has changed into cinematography, which is a whole other thing. I feel like there's been more of an uptick in it. There was a period in the early to mid 2000s where videos were, I don't want to say like security camera, but more or less there was a limited creativity. It was not, it was like, hey, you're just there, and the
Yeah.
camera's on a tripod, and people, I mean, it's not how we shop, but the industry had this sort of perception of, all I'm getting is like, I'm watching the dance floor, and the cinematography aspect of it, as I call it, when DSLRs got involved, and it became more of an art form. I think people were like, "Hey, wow, these trailers, that's great. I can see the best 8 minutes of my wedding. I can put it on Facebook, and it's great. And I don't have to sit there for like 2 hours and watch like it go on and on and
Yeah.
on."
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've seen an uptick again, and I think it's specifically due to that, because it's become, just as photography is an art form, the actual cinematography now has become an art form as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you find anybody looking to like live stream their weddings or anything like that?
Yeah, so we, going back a few years, we actually had set up where we were able to live stream for, families that had, relatives out of the country or what have you. And it was such a big to do because we had to have a laptop and a hotspot and
Yeah.
everything. In fact, we used to have it on our price list, and we used to, offer it. Now with, it's
Yeah.
literally, their guests can do it, or you can, designate somebody to kind of do it for you. So we do see it getting done. However, the instances where we're doing it now has declined, simply because the technology is there in everybody's pocket.
Yeah. It's
You know?
so easy to do it now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what, I mean, base package, what am I looking at cost wise?
So we don't do any set packages, and I mean, that's been for like almost 20 years that we've done it that way. Because my feeling is that every family, every couple is different. Maybe your parents don't want albums, maybe there's a divorce, but whatever the circumstances are. So what we do is meet with clients, and number one, try to get an idea of what their expectations are, both budget wise and
Mhm.
in terms of coverage. So most of our clients have two photographers, at least for some portion of the day, and a videographer. What we do is then build out after that. What else would you want? Our
Yeah.
average photo only package is probably in the high fours,
Okay.
and adding in video adds roughly another 2,500 to that.
Yeah.
And so,
Okay.
we wind up in an average in the 6,000-ish range for photo and video, which in the New York, area here, especially on Long Island, where it's very competitive, is a sweet spot. And so I think that for what we offer, the overall experience, we're priced I say very fairly. We're
Yeah.
not,
Well,
certainly people that are cheaper for sure.
yeah, there's a lot of, it's an easy market that you can, there's a low barrier to entry, right? So you
Yes.
have a lot of lower end competition basically, and people use them and it happens. But I like to look at it like, well, you have 30 years of experience that's going into this thing. Number one, number two, you've got a couple of people on staff that are actually providing the service, right? And then how many, I mean, you probably have 30 hours of editing afterwards and production and all this stuff, not to mention the day of, right? So
Hmm.
40 hours, right? Typical wedding is what you've got into it, plus your experience and time. So I think that's very
Yep.
reasonable, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's where, with the post wedding process is where I feel like we excel more than most. A lot of photographers, look, everybody's got a different business model. They can be single operators. They could be a smaller studio, a larger studio like us, but most of them are just focused on the next sale.
Yeah.
Um, and the best salesperson you have, and this obviously sounds trite and overused, but is your existing clients. And so our focus is making sure that those clients after the wedding have a great experience, because that's when they're still excited about it. And so if you're dragging your feet and you're not getting albums to them, or you're not getting back to them because you're understaffed or whatever, it's like they just start to get like, I want to be done with you. And so that's where we really excel and say, hey, listen, we want to deliver a great product like we promised. And so, yeah, getting those good people and, talented people who want to be paid well and who want to have a company that they can grow within is important, just as it is in any other industry. It's just that I
Absolutely.
feel like the wedding industry, it's mom and pop. It's very regional. It has been since the beginning. And so that's where a lot of not just photography, but wedding industry owners, I feel, get a little jammed up because they're not able to make that next jump to like, hey, I need to make sure that it's not just about me putting nice flowers on the table, or me, delivering, what goes into that? How does the client feel from end to end? Because that, when I go shopping or when I'm, interacting with a company, I don't just base it on, I mean, it's very rare that I just base it on the actual commodity of buying the pen. It's usually from the minute I walk in the door that you're looking at everything. And so we
Yeah.
try to model ourselves. Like, some of my favorite places to go into are hotel lobbies because, I get inspiration, like the scents and how they have it
Yeah.
set up and the furniture and all the decor, because those are places that are pleasing to the eye, to all the senses. You try to engage as many senses as you can. And if
Yeah.
you do a good job at that, people are immediately, the defenses go down and they're like, okay, so I'm open to what you have to offer here.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. What advice would you have for couples that are getting married today?
So as it relates to photography and video, do your homework, because there are more choices out there than ever before. And there is a lot of, like, there's so much noise, and there's just, you coming from, like, the second that you sign up on a website, you're going to be bombarded
Yep.
with, emails. And so, well, actually, the first bit of advice I'll give you is set up a wedding email and don't give
Yeah.
your email and your real email. But really, I find that, in the last couple of years, private Facebook groups, we've got a big one out here on Long Island that I know in other areas, are a great resource for brides because they haven't been infiltrated by vendors, or it's just brides talking to brides. So it can be very raw, very transparent, as it should be, and get some recommendations there. Go online, read reviews, talk to friends, talk to families, talk to your caterer, whoever you can, and look for the names that you hear often. And narrow your list down before you start visiting places. Like when we have clients come visit us, we know that we're one of the finalists, because why would you want to go visit 15 different places for an hour each just to hear, which is why we tell clients, you want to know the pricing? Here's the pricing. You don't even have to come. We'll just tell you the pricing. You want to do a phone appointment? It's fine. You want to do a virtual? That's fine. But, let's make it convenient for you, because, if you don't, you'll wind up literally, I mean, a wedding is a part-time job you've got here to
Yeah.
plan a wedding. You're not getting paid for it. And so try to maximize your time, your resources, manage the budget well, say, here's what's really important. Here's what I can, trim back on. And just make sure that the places that you actually choose are professional places that obviously check all the boxes, but that you feel genuinely good about. Like, okay, I mean, there's just that gut instinct where you're like, okay, don't get sold, I guess, I mean, and that's, I think, goes for more than just photography and wedding services.
Yeah, that's great. You talked about it earlier, but the experience, it seems like, I mean, that's really kind of where it's at, right? Like them coming in and having an experience with you is probably the most important thing. I mean, like you said, buying a pen, right? Like, so, I mean, yeah, I go up to the store, buy a pen. In fact, I went up to Office Max a couple of weeks ago, and and this is the experience I had, and it's crazy, right? I just went to go buy some pads, some notepads, right? Because I like to write on paper. So I went up, I go to the store. There's one person at the cash register taking people's money. There's like 6 people in line, and there's 3 or 4 people just hanging out in the aisles doing whatever. And
Right.
I'm thinking to myself, you guys should be up there at the thing trying to get people through the store, right? And I literally just put down what I had and I walked out because I didn't have time. I had to go do something else. And I said, I'll get it
Right.
later. I actually ended up ordering on Amazon and then got it the
Boom.
next day. So,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? It's about that experience that they have with you that makes the lasting impact. Because um, even though you're doing a one-time day, those people are customers for life, right?
Yes.
They're gonna be customers maybe some other time in their life. They're gonna recommend you to. I can't tell you how many interviews I've had where people have said most of my business is coming from word of mouth. So
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I
so
mean,
yeah,
And that is like, yeah, because we're not a commoditized industry, pens. Yeah, it's like, just order on it. You know what I mean? Like you said, you get worn down, because the corporations, they're like, hey, we need to keep the number as low as possible. So you got one cash register person, but in our industry, this is like, first of all, I mean, I'll just call it what it is. It's insane expenditure for a single day, and it's a
Yeah,
celebration, and it's great. But for your money, you should really get that full experience. You shouldn't feel like, oh well, I've got to, even if you're scaling back in one particular category, that shouldn't mean that you're meeting with some person like in their basement or somewhere where, and you're kind of like, what's going on, what I mean? It should be like, hey,
yeah,
I feel, like, from the minute like I said, from the minute you walk in, until you're picking up your album and finishing up with us, it has to be like, wow, that is just awesome. I just, because, like I said earlier, we're the only vendor that's around after the wedding. And so that's an opportunity for us to sort of, that impression that they've had all along,
yeah.
keep enforcing it. And, wow, this is great. And, those are the little things that, for smaller, companies, they have to figure a way out to do that, because not doing it presents a real challenge.
Agreed, agreed. So let's flip a little bit and talk about business side.
Sure.
What would you say is working well for you right now, business wise? And it could be anything like marketing, it could be just like logistics,
Sure.
whatever, supply chain, anything.
So we put a lot of time and effort into our marketing, and that doesn't just mean like, social media or advertising, on the nod or whatever. We do have a full-time social media person, because people, especially in our industry, brides want to see photos and
Yeah,
videos. You know what I mean? And so it's, in that way, it's great for us because it's very tangible. It's like, hey, I just want to see photos. But so obviously that's a big part of the initial thing, but making it easy, and how do you relate to the client? So, and what I mean by that is, 5 years ago, we would get a new lead in via email, and we would call the client to try to set up an appointment. And, for the most part, hey, that'd work out. Maybe we're leaving a voicemail, maybe they're calling back. And so we made a decision a couple years ago. I said, "What? That's not how I communicate. That's not how most people communicate. Most people don't want it. They see it from, they're like, I don't recognize, who is this? I don't know who this is.
yeah,
They don't even pick it up." So how can we make that easier? Well, texting for number one. So we found a service that allows our clients to text us, which they do all the time now, just to our business number. So I don't have to have a separate cell number.
yeah.
They can text. Yeah.
Perfect.
How else? Okay. Well, why do we have to make the appointment for them? What if we just say, hey, you can make your own appointment, and is there some software that does that? And we found that, so we look for those little gaps in where things might not be as efficient as they could be. We text our clients 24 hours before their appointment, 24 hours before their engagement shoot. It's once again,
Yeah,
automatic, but all these little things. So our instances of no shows are virtually gone. I mean, because people are like, oh, I can't make it, or I need to reschedule or whatever.
yeah,
And so that's on the front end. The investment in people can never be overstated enough, because and that's probably the biggest challenge, is getting good people and keeping them. Because like you said earlier, the barrier to entry here is so low
yep,
that, you've got people who are like, hey, I could do this. And they're like, I'm going to go do it. They don't
yep,
know all the other stuff that goes into it,
sure.
but trying to keep them, because then they go off on their own and they realize in 5 years, holy crap, this is hell of a lot harder than I thought it was going to
Yeah,
be. They made it
exactly.
look so easy, but and look, learning from your mistakes and saying, okay, what did we do wrong? Where did we mess up? Where can we kind of, put a system in place that is going to make this watertight? And to me, all of that is part of marketing, because pretty much like everything is marketing. The entire
Yeah,
experience is. And so those are some of the ways that we've kind of said, how can we focus on, that in a big picture way. And so that's working. I think that'll probably always work. The one thing I will say is, as it relates to like, social media and marketing, is you've got to adapt and roll with it, because it's ever changing. I'm trying to like, hey, was there ever, we couldn't figure out anything with Snapchat. Is there anything we can do with TikTok? Is there like,
yeah,
because that might be the place that, your bride who's now 15.
Yeah,
So I mean, I mean, and so those are, is there a way that we can kind of engage there somehow, or make something kind of goofy or whatever? But
exactly.
you've got to, once again, you've got to continue to evolve, and it's not just, hey, I went from film to digital. It's I went from shooting just video, we're into cinematography. It's got to be more a whole sort of holistic company-wide thing that you say, okay, this is on every aspect of it. How can we kind of be a little better?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. Honestly, that's what the large corporations do when they try to streamline and make things more efficient is they're looking at the end-to-end process, right? And go, look, we have this thing and we have to produce this other thing. So what do we need to do to make that as efficient and easy as possible to work with our customer and to get that thing out the door? That's just the way it
Absolutely.
works.
Yeah.
And in small business, right? Particularly in this industry, it's very creative, right? People don't think about the business aspect. And I think it's
No.
great that you're thinking about the end-to-end process on how do we make it easier to communicate and to get people to, that's brilliant, right? Like I I started texting a while back too, right? I was like, man, why can't just people just text me, right? Why do they have to call me?
Right.
So I have on my website, look, you
Yeah.
have a
I
question,
saw that.
text me or call me, whatever works for you. I don't care, text me. And I get texts all the time and I just
Right.
reply back and it's perfect, works great.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's how you communicate. You know what I mean? That's
yeah,
how you're communicating on a day. So if you're communicating that way,
yeah,
I mean, more than 50% of the appointments that we get now are made by clients themselves. I mean, when we start, we're like, I don't know, is this going to work? Maybe, but it's like,
yeah.
now we're just like,
Yeah,
why do we wait so long to do this?
yeah. Sometimes though, I think though that we as people we get stuck in our ways in a box. I like to call it, and we do need to think outside. Like I know people that they're not into texting and they're not into certain things, but because that's the way people in general are moving, they're not willing to adapt to that, and I think they need to rethink that, right? Because it might not be in business very much longer if they don't adapt.
You're right.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 So on the flip side of what's working well, what's not working well, would you say?
What's not working well? So that's a good question. I mean, look, we're always trying to get things done. Every bride, because we're a big studio. We have it takes us a little longer to get your sneak peek to you. So that maybe a person who's an independent, and like the next day or 2 days after the wedding, the bride is seeing like some photos that were taken. Which is something that is difficult for us to do. So sort of condensing the timeline, because when you have scaled it, you have to say, okay, well, we did that well, but how are we able to continue to do it? Because that's the whole thing. They're excited about it. They're still,
Yeah,
so that's presented one challenge in terms of, marketing. I do feel like, without naming specific websites, there are a few out there that were working for us really well a few years ago that aren't anymore, because I think they're just simply oversaturated. In fact, I had a conversation with a salesperson from one of these companies, and I said, most of our clients, besides just coming from previous recommendations, are now coming from these Facebook, groups or what have you. I'm seeing a lot of like dead leads here. Inquiries that aren't really inquiries, because when you ask for the inquiry from company A, they say, hey, we can also send you 6 other inquiries for these other companies, and it just happens automatically. That's not really a hot lead, so that's why
yeah,
it's just an empty. And so that which worked 5 years ago now is like, that's not really. And so I think brides are using that further down the line in terms of a resource. But you have to be able to track that. Like we only
yeah,
know that because we track it. We're fanatical about how we're tracking how they get to us and what the conversion is from wherever it might be. If you're a small independent operator, you're just like, hey, I need to have a presence here in X place because that's the biggest place. And these places, as you know, they're not cheap to advertise on.
nope, they're not.
But it's just such massive quantity. I mean, I don't feel like it's doing the bride any favors if you've got 25 photographers that are featured on your first page.
Yeah,
So does that mean, okay, so yeah, I've got 25. So let me just start narrowing that down. You know what I mean? And so that's something that definitely is not working like it did, but
Well,
it's
it's a
then how do you,
challenge, right? It's a
yeah, how do you
challenge.
transition out, and where do you kind of put those dollars and cents, and what do you do from there with it?
Yeah. Well, at least you're tracking it, because that's kind of the key, right? Tracking where you're getting your leads from, and
Yep.
then being able to figure out, okay, well, if we're getting all our leads from this one thing or these couple of things, let's focus our resources on something else so that we don't have to. Maybe it's let's take the money we were spending here and let's go start making TikTok videos and figure out how to penetrate that market, right? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It could be
Yeah.
anything, right?
Yep.
But you got to keep, like you said, you got to keep evolving, but then you got to also evaluate what you have so you can figure out, okay, I'm spending $10,000 a year on advertising and I'm only getting X from this, but all right, well, let me take 5 of that and let me go put it over here and see what
Right.
I can do with that, right? Oh,
Yep.
that's working now. Okay, great. Well, let's put more investment in that right now, right? And that's going
Yep.
to evolve and change, right? Because it's going to
Yep.
go out and it's something that be something else, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But you have to do that, and that's where, if you're an independent, person, you're 1, 2 people in your operation, it's hard because you're answering the phones and you're editing the jobs and you're designing the albums and you've got all those hats to wear, and so and that's a tough bridge to gap, to go from, what I found is most challenging is from when we went from like 70, 80 jobs, and I'm going back a long time, from 70 to 80 jobs a year, which is like, okay, this is like a full-time thing, to getting to like 200 plus, you know what I mean? Because that gap in there is where a lot of places just hit their ceiling, where it's like, okay, well, I got to hire more people, but I'm worried about hiring more people because I don't have, you know what I mean? And so, but when you don't do that, then in the end, you wind up trying to do everything,
yeah,
or you and another person, and then everything starts to sink and it's not so good, you know what I mean? And so it is definitely challenging, and that's where you have to kind of know your limitations and say, okay, time management is more important now than ever, as are analytics and tracking stuff to make sure that where your dollars are going and are they well spent.
yeah. And then, as a business owner and with employees, then you have to start learning how to delegate, right? And
Yeah.
let people take care of stuff so you can focus on other stuff. That's
Yes.
kind of a hard part, I feel like, in small business, right? Is like you're so used to doing everything the way that you do it, and then all of a sudden now you got to figure out how to delegate, and it's hard.
Especially in a creative field,
Yeah,
because you feel like, okay, better than anybody the picture that you like, or for this particular ad, and that's where you have to be willing to give up a little creative control. But once again, that comes down to, my art director, who's also our GM, he is really well schooled in knowing, kind of now after 10 years, what I like,
yeah,
and can kind of be like, but that just happens through that commitment. And once again, me making that investment when, it was like a bigger investment, like, hey, I've got to bring somebody in here who can do, most studios don't have an art director who can
right.
oversee, and, they're like probably doing it themselves,
Yep,
or they have an editor that, they outsource to, or that they can have doing it, but it's not going to give you that same sort of feedback that you need. But yeah, taking the hat off and letting somebody else wear it and saying, okay, you drive,
yeah,
especially if you're used to driving, is very tough.
yeah. That's really hard. So one day you and I are going to retire. What would be your number one advice that you would give anyone else coming up behind us?
So, honestly, focus on like customer experience, and realize what your limitations are. Figure out first, especially if you're in our industry, what you want to be. Do you want to be a person that shoots every job yourself, and is charging $10,000 or $15,000? Like, because if you're doing every job yourself, you want to maximize your income potential.
Yep,
And where is that? Obviously you need to have skills, you need to have talent.
sure.
And if you want to be that sort of person that says, okay, I'm going to shoot 50 jobs and they're going to be destination, and I'm going to shoot $10,000 and up, then make sure that you're taking some of that money and investing it in a good back office that can help you be what you want to be there. Because if not, you're going to run yourself ragged. On the flip side, if you want to become more of a studio, that is more about, yeah, building a good, strong foundation, which in this day and age is tough because, like I said, you said before, the barrier for entry is incredibly low. So other people are like, well, what do I need to,
Yeah.
I can just do this myself, and so getting those people to commit and to want to be someplace. Because look, when you're the boss, you've got to pay the bills. You've got to do all the things that people don't want to do, and that comes at a price. Even though you're the one getting that big deposit check or whatever, you need to make sure that you're still around. When the bride comes back 2 years from now and wants her album, you've got the money to pay for it. And so, making sure that you figure out what you want to be. Do you want to be a big studio? Do you want to be a single sort of independent person? And then figuring out, okay, how can I best deliver the best possible experience and still have like a life?
Yeah.
I mean, because
What,
that's,
John? You want a life?
yeah, really want a life. I mean, I think that that's a very, very tough balance to have. But you have, and then start to project out in 5 and 10 years. Where do you want to go? What do you see because I've said many a time, we in our industry, we age, the brides don't. The
Yep.
brides are always going to be 27 to 30 or whatever. Yet
Yep.
if you're an MC or you're a photographer, you're going to get older. And how do you relate to your client now that you're old enough to be maybe their father?
Yeah. Or grandfather in some cases, right?
Right. And are you the best person suited to, be the MC on that job when you're, much older than the entire crowd? You know what I mean? And so that's where you kind of have to find that balance.
Yeah. Good. Good. Okay. So last question. What's your best, worst wedding or business story you got for me?
So the best one we have I have, is in 2012. Obviously, we were hit by Hurricane Sandy here,
Yep.
which really decimated parts of Long Island, but mostly like the Rockaways and stuff. And there were weddings that were postponed for that weekend, and I mean the following weekend and stuff. And so we had basically afterwards, we had I just realized that it was such a flux here. And I said, as an industry, I know that we can do something. And so we formed this thing called the Wedding Rescue Team, which was basically, I went to like other local vendors, caterers, DJs, limousine companies, people that basically everybody that needs to put together a wedding, and said, hey, listen, let's give somebody let's kind of do something to like uplift here, because people are just feeling and hearing, and it's like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And so we had some great companies that donated their time and their services, and we were able to award. We had three, basically a grand prize, a second, and a third prize. But the grand prize wound up being like almost a $30,000 wedding from like pretty much soup to nuts. That was pretty much like the couple that won it, they lost everything. I mean, they lost like their house. They were like, it was pretty, like they had just gotten engaged and literally no house, no nothing.
Wow.
And so their lives were turned upside down in a matter of 24 hours. And so that was a great moment for us as a company. We really, you can't, I mean, obviously it was a rough time for everybody to go through that, but that was sort of a really good silver lining that came out of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's really good. John, thanks for doing this. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure, Shane.
All right. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. I hope that you found it helpful. Please share it with other people. Also, if you're getting married or you work in the wedding industry, I would love to interview and share your information with other people. Send me a text, 520-399-8580, or shoot me an email at letschat@wedding.report.